everything I'm supposed to learn for the bar exam? A lot of people feel overwhelmed when they start bar prep because their commercial course will send them a big box of outlines and they'll have all this stuff and they'll say, how am I supposed to learn all of this for the bar exam? And it's a very common question because it really does give people a lot of anxiety when they see everything that they get from their commercial course. So we have a couple tips for you. The first is to keep in mind you don't have to know everything about all areas of law to pass the bar exam. In fact, it's much better to focus on the highly tested areas of law. You don't want to ignore anything, but you want to spend your time where you're going to pick up the most points. For example, in torts, negligence makes up 12 to 13 of the scored MBE questions. So literally half of the multiple choice questions that test torts are going to cover negligence. And negligence is really highly tested on a lot of state essay exams and the multi-state essay exam. So it's a really important topic to know. So when you're studying torts, you want to make sure that you're making negligence a priority. I had a student who was taking a state bar exam where the essays did not test the rule against perpetuities. They just weren't tested. The rule against perpetuities just wasn't tested on the essay portion. And she literally spent a full weekend studying the rule against perpetuities. And the rule against perpetuities is going to be probably one multiple choice question. So she's basically spending an entire weekend so that she can maybe get that one question correct on the multiple choice portion of the bar exam. She would have been much better off spending that weekend studying negligence. If she spent that weekend studying negligence, she's going to get 12 to 13 points on the MBE and whatever points are allocated to the essay question that could potentially test negligence. So negligence would be way more worth her time to focus on memorizing rather than nuances of the rule against perpetuities. In her case, because the rule against perpetuities was not tested on the essay portion of the bar exam. So keep that in mind when you're studying. You don't have to treat everything equally. You can allocate more time to the highly tested areas of law, and that's one of the key ways to study smart for the bar exam. The next thing to remember is that you don't have to memorize everything in a day or a week or even 2 weeks. You have all of bar prep to memorize. A common mistake that some first-time takers make is they will put off memorization till the end, and then no wonder they feel overwhelmed because they only have 2 weeks to memorize all of these outlines. What makes a lot more sense is to start memorizing from the very first week of bar prep. This will help you retain the information, and you'll be getting multiple choice questions right and essay questions right, and a much higher percentage than you would be if you were not memorizing from the beginning. So for example, if your commercial course starts by covering torts and you have a torts lecture Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, after that torts lecture, review the outline, memorize it, try to commit it to memory, and spend time on it every single day. By the end of the week, you should feel pretty good about torts, so when you move on to evidence or whatever subject is next, you can still come back and review the torts outline once or twice, but you'll already kind of know it, so it'll just be about retaining the information and reviewing it. If you dedicate time to memorize every single day, it won't be overwhelming because you're breaking it down into a manageable task, rather than saying, okay, I have 2 weeks to memorize everything. And our last tip is to divide your outline into increments. One of the reasons that people feel overwhelmed by some courses is they'll send you 4 different versions of the same outline. Like here's the torts mini outline, and here's the torts long outline, and here's the torts lecture handout, and blah, 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 blah. So just pick one. Usually the lecture handout is of a good length and it has enough information. And furthermore, you'll be reviewing it in lecture, so it makes sense to pick a lecture handout. Pick one and then focus on that one outline rather than trying to look at all 4 different versions of the same outline or cross-referencing them. You'll drive yourself crazy if you do that. Just pick one outline and divide it into manageable chunks. So for torts, you can divide it into intentional torts and defenses to intentional torts, and then privacy torts or whatever. But pick about like 5-page increments, divide it into those manageable chunks. And then when you go through the outline, just memorize it in these manageable chunks. So start by saying, I'm going to memorize all the intentional torts and see if you can remember the elements, go through an active process, take a quick break once you're done doing that, and then come back and move on to the next section. So if you say, rather than looking at a big stack of outlines, if you say, I'm going to focus on one outline per subject, and I'm dividing it into manageable chunks, and I'm going to focus on one chunk of the outline at a time, then you'll be in much better shape to actually learn the material. You'll feel much less overwhelmed, and you'll get through a lot of material. You'll start to get pretty good at this skill of memorizing, and you'll feel better and better as your bar exam study period progresses. So hopefully this gives you some good tips for memorizing your bar exam outlines.